Welcome to episode 36 of the Total Hockey Training Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Scahan. Hey guys, if you like the show, like I said before, I love doing these interviews with people who I've come across in my journey. If you like the show, we're on all platforms now, Apple, Spotify. If you like the show, don't be afraid to share it or leave a comment or rate it. That'd be awesome. And also Total Hockey Training. We're in our in-season phase. So if you're a young hockey player or any age hockey player all across the globe and you need a program to help you achieve your goals, check out Total Hockey Training on Train Heroic. Okay, my next guest, I'm very honored to have him on. All-around great guy, a great hockey player. I have Joe Dipenta. Joe is a former NHL defenseman. And of course, he is a member of the 2007 Stanley Cup Champion Anaheim Ducks. Joe, welcome to the show. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Sean. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So I want to get into what you're up to these days and what you've been up to since the last time I've seen you, but tell the listeners about where you're from, how you got into hockey. Just talk about young Joe Dipenta running around, if you could.
Yeah, I grew up in a town called Cold Harbor, Nova Scotia. And it's the same hometown as Sidney Crosby and Nathan MacKinnon.
Yeah.
And in that town, we had 20,000 people. We had a great, thriving minor hockey program. There was a lot of new families that moved into the area. So we always had one of the top teams, if not the best team in the province at all the different age levels. So I grew up playing with the top players. And I was just passionate about hockey. I remember when my parents gave me my first hockey net and a stick and a ball in the basement. I was 3 years old, 4 years old. And my mom's strategy was to keep me out of trouble. She didn't, I was the firstborn and she's overprotective mom. She's like, I don't want little Joey to get into trouble when he's older, so we'll give him something to do. And my dad never really played hockey, and my mom's side never played hockey for the most part. So it was a fluke, really, that I discovered the game. But when I started to play it, I was a natural and loved it. And I got on the skates and skating, and I tried minor hockey, and I really wasn't that great. I think I was okay, but I didn't blossom until like my fourth season. It was like fourth season. I now was one of the older kids on the team. I was a returning player. The season before, I had like 2 goals. And then that fourth season, I ended up getting almost 50 goals as a defenseman, and and it was like, wow, like I'm actually pretty good. And that was, but it took a while, and then I just fell in love with the game. Played street hockey every day after school. Even if I didn't have anyone to play with, I was out on the street by myself shooting around. I tried to rope into other kids in the neighborhood to play with me, even if they didn't like hockey. I remember one kid, I encouraged him to play, and he didn't know how to play, and he broke 3 of my hockey sticks, and that pissed me off. I was like, I had to go, tell his mom that, like, he broke 3 of my sticks, but yeah, that was pretty much like my passion was just any chance I could. I just wanted to have a stick in my hand and shoot around, and had some epic hockey games on my street growing up.
That's awesome. Did you play other sports growing up, Joe?
I did. I played baseball for 4 years and a bit of golf, and I wasn't very good. I was good at baseball, played as a pitcher, I could hit, but I just got sick of it. It was too much of hockey transitioning and competitive baseball. I needed a break, so I stopped playing baseball. In golf, I got into, but I never really got that good, so I didn't really like golf too much. I'm still not very good, but I dispel that stereotype that all hockey players are good at golf, except for Joe Dipenta. I am not a good golfer, so don't invite me to be on your tournament team to go play in a scramble, because I'm not going to hit it 300 yards. And but I've disappointed a lot of people in the sport of golf. So
So tell me now, definitely around that time, it was unusual for, I guess, any Canadian to go the US college route. Can you talk about that? Like, how did you get to Boston University?
yeah, great question. My dad was smart. He's a smart guy, and he his strategy was, let's just get Joe his education paid for. And if he can get his education paid for, if he ends up going beyond that, that's like a gravy. But the expectation was like get education paid for. So when I was a 15-year-old, I was one of 4 players in my age group in the area I grew up in that were highly touted for major junior and the NHL. And when I say highly touted, I mean like getting drafted to the NHL maybe in the first 3 rounds. Like I wasn't going to be a first overall draft pick or anything. And so I started getting attention from agents and scouts. And so they were talking to my mom and dad and telling my parents what they wanted to hear. And he's going to play in the NHL and he's really good. But my dad was always like, okay, let's just keep it focused on getting an education. So I remember having 2 major junior Hall Olympics general manager, Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, sitting in my front room in my house. I was a 15-year-old, and they were telling me how they know Wayne Gretzky and how they know all these different the who's who of the NHL and how they have all gone through all the players have gone through their program. And they told me, look, we're going to draft you in the first round if you commit to us that you're going to come, because we don't want to waste our draft pick. But we've had other Nova Scotians come through, and so I remember feeling like, wow, this is what I want to do. I'm going to play this 2 years from now, 3 years from now. I'm going to be drafted in the NHL. I'm going to make it to the NHL. I just know it. And remember my dad saying, I think you should go the US college route. And in my heart of hearts, I thought, no, I want to play in the NHL. And this is what I want to do. I'm going to follow this dream, and this is my opportunity. And I knew how popular I would be with all my friends and teammates, and to be able to go in Canada, this is the ticket. You go play
Yeah.
major junior. You're looked up to instantaneously by everyone in your community and in your school, and I would be kind of like sort of famous in my circles if I had taken this. And my dad just said, you know what, I think you should go this other way. And I was a firstborn, a people pleaser. I always wanted to please my parents as a firstborn, and so I said, okay, dad and mom, and I think I'll try this other way. So we went to prep school hockey in Boston for my junior year of high school. And it was a Lawrence Academy, about 40
Yeah.
minutes outside of Boston in Groton, Massachusetts,
Hmm.
and a little small town. First year living away from home. I remember when my mom, I remember mentioning my overprotective mom, firstborn, understandably so. She's great mother, couldn't ask for anything more. And I remember she was like just in tears, dropped me off, and I was so distraught. Like I actually underestimated how hard it was going to be to live on my own in a dorm with these other young aspiring athletes, and it was a tough year. I had a hard time. I got caught up in the Sean, you'll laugh at this because you know how meticulous I was with my diet. I played for the Ducks, right?
Yeah.
And I got put on the freshman 15, in the cafeteria, and so that affected my performance. I didn't have a great year. I didn't have a very good hockey season, and it was like in the blink of an eye. In 3 months, hockey season was over, and I was used to that
Hmm.
6 month playing 60, 70, 80 games, and we were at 28 games. And that was it.
Hmm.
And so I didn't have very many scouts looking for me, and no college letters for the most part. And my roommate, in the contrast, he was recruited by a number of different teams, and I was kind of jealous of that. And I remember feeling like, hey, this is really somewhat disappointing. And so I made a commitment after the season. I said, from March to the rest of the year, I'm going to lose some weight. I lost like 20 pounds. I went into the summer, lost like 30 pounds from that year, and I went into this tournament in Boston called Hockey Night in Boston, and I was on the Atlantic Canadian team, and I had all these scouts after that weekend just coming up to me and saying it was like I was a different player.
Wow.
And and then I needed a change, I think, just for my confidence. And I ended up going to junior hockey in Ottawa and getting onto a team there and had a great year. I got a full scholarship to Boston University. And that's kind of that was the track I took. And then after I left, I ended up playing 2 years at Boston University, and then I came back to play major junior for Halifax Moosehead. So I did the full game. I did prep school hockey, I did junior hockey, and then I did NCAA, and then I did major junior. So there's not many players out there that have done all four. And I'm the only one I know of that have done all four. So when young kids, players come up to me and their parents, they want to get advice of what they should do, I can speak from experience and say, well, I've done all four of them, and these are the differences, and this is what you want to look out for, and what you can anticipate when you're making that decision. And it's such a big decision to make as a young player,
Yeah.
uh, 15, 16 years old, after to decide that, and especially for the parents as well. So I empathize with the families that are going through it.
That's an interesting perspective. So you spent a year at Lawrence Academy, then went back to Canada to what league would have been, Joe? Like obviously it's not major junior because you went to college afterwards. What league would that have been?
It was Tier 2 junior, and the league I played in was called the Central Junior Hockey League in Ottawa, which I'll
Okay.
put a plug in for that league. The most travel you have is like 3 hours on a bus, and you're sleeping in your own bed every night. It's not a lot of travel. So like most of your games are within an hour, depending which team you play for. So it's a good balance of being able to go to a school, live with a family. It's going to look after you, and to be able to get some good hockey and get exposure to the scouts. And a lot of the games are scouted. So it's a
That's
really
great.
good.
So obviously you dropped some weight and you turned some heads. What NHL team drafted you?
The Florida Panthers.
Florida Panthers. Okay, and you were at Boston University at the time, or
Yeah,
going there?
I finished my freshman season, and I was drafted as a 19-year-old, which is
Overager.
still
Okay.
like that. But the 19-year-old, they're delayed a year to get drafted in the NHL if you're coming from NCAA. At least that's the way it used to be.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. So 2 years in Halifax after BU, and then was it on to Florida's American League team?
No, I ended up going. So I played 1 year with the Mooseheads. After I played 2 years at BU, 1 year with the Mooseheads,
Oh, 1 year.
and
Okay.
I was an overage player on the team, and I was too old to go back into the draft as a 21-year-old. And so there's a loophole for us, and this was all calculated through my agent, that if the Florida Panthers didn't offer me a contract that was acceptable, and back then you could get a bigger signing bonus. It was before the collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
So if that didn't come to our liking, to what we thought we deserved, or I could negotiate better, I became a free agent. So I actually became a free agent. Florida offered me a contract, but it was about a half as what I ended up getting from a free agent market from the Philadelphia Flyers. So my first team was
Flyers.
the Flyers organization.
Okay. Okay. And then so was it was it Lehigh Valley then, or was it someplace different?
It was actually in Philadelphia, the
That's right.
Philadelphia Flames.
They played at the old at the I
Spectrum.
forget the Spectrum. Yeah, they played the Spectrum. That's right. So the big club played at the now the Wells Fargo Arena, and the Spectrum was still there, and they were the Philadelphia Flyers. So were you on that team that won the Calder Cup?
Not in Philadelphia. I ended up being on the Calder team that won in Chicago in 2001. But the '98 Phantoms, they won the Calder Cup, and I came in '99 2000. So it was like 2 years before, 2 seasons before they won.
Okay. Well, I was thinking more about I guess 2004, 2005 season when they had the lockout in the NHL.
That's right. They won again. Yeah,
Yeah.
they beat us actually. No, sorry, the Chicago Wolves beat us in the semifinals when I was playing for the Manitoba Moose. That was the season before Anaheim. And then
Yes.
I,
Yes.
the Wolves lost in the finals against the Phantoms, who had like Carter and Richards, and they had a stacked team.
Yeah, they did. They did. And Cincinnati was the team that I was working with, and I remember playing the Manitoba Moose and seeing their fiery coach on the bench, and we'll get into him in a little bit. But so let's talk about that now. Let's talk about how, let's talk about that year in Anaheim. Was 06, 07 your first year?
No, I came in '05. Yeah, '05, '06 was my first year. So it was a great after the lockout season, my rookie year.
Yes.
And the season before I played in the Manitoba Moose. So do you want me to talk a little about how that all came together?
Yes, absolutely. I do. Absolutely. I want to get into that. Go ahead.
So in the lockout season, I was signed by the Vancouver Canucks, and then of course there's a lockout which we didn't know about until the first couple of weeks of the season. So we ended up playing in the American Hockey League the entire year, which I would have been anyway. I wouldn't have made the NHL that year. And my coach was Randy Carlisle. And I remember
Yeah.
distinctively at the start of the year, Randy would sit down with all of his players doing one-on-one, which I'd never had before from a coach. And Randy, so this is different. And he was sitting down with me, and I didn't know Randy that well. I probably played for him for about a month,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think the season had started officially. I think it was like just the training camp and some exhibition games. And he said to me, he said, Joe, I still remember this question. He asked me probably a bunch of questions, but this is the only question I remember. He said, Joe, what type of player are you? Who is Joe Dipenta, the hockey player? I thought, what is he talking about? Like, I have no idea what he means by this question. So I didn't know how to answer it. So I just did the best I could. I gave him a very political answer. I said, well, Randy, I can play in the power play, put me on the second power play unit. I can play the last minute of the game. I can make that good first pass. I gave him the jack of all trades answers because I was like, I didn't know where he wanted, what he was looking for for an answer. So I just kind of covered all the bases. And he said, well, Joe, he says, I actually don't think you can play in the power play. I was like, I remember thinking like, ouch, like that really hurt. I'm not sure maybe he doesn't like me, like that's what I was thinking. And then then he responded with, but I think you can play in the NHL. And I just had this like pause and I was like, okay. He had my attention at that point.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
was listening for what he was going to say next. He said, Joe, I think you can be a shutdown defenseman. You can be a defenseman that doesn't let the other team score when you're on the ice. That's who I see Joe Dipenta as. And I think you can play in the NHL if you do that. And I thought, okay, well, what is it? And I said, because I didn't know what he was talking about. I still didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand what he meant. He said, Joe, when you're on the ice, just don't let the other team score. He says, I don't care if you ice the puck a dozen times a game because you're shooting it off the glass. He says, I don't care. He says, I just don't want to see any soft plays. I don't want you to take any risk. When you're on the ice, everything is as you do it as hard as you can, be as hard to play against as possible. So I said, all I have to do is just don't let the other team score. He said, that's it. And I thought, wow, I said, I think I can do that. I think I can do that. And so the whole rest of that season, I just gradually started to like learn how do I not the other team score, and that's all I focused on. So I could measure that with my plus minus. So my plus minus at the end of the game, if it was a plus, then I knew I did my job, and if it wasn't, if I was a minus, then I knew that I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. And my confidence went like 1% increase every day. And gradually, by the end of that season, I was playing against the other team's top lines. We made it to the final four in the playoffs, and I was a shutdown defenseman playing against all the other top players. And Randy trusted me like his firstborn child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's his words of his mouth. That's what he described me as my style of play. So when Randy became the head coach of the Anaheim Ducks, 2 weeks before that, I had been offered a 2-year contract with the Vancouver Canucks. And I remember playing golf with my dad, and we got this phone call, and my agent said, Joe, it's June 30th, which I knew the next day was free agency. And he said, Joe, they want to sign you to a 2-year contract. It's a two-way contract for 2 years. It's okay money. But they said, if you don't sign it in the next 6 hours, they're taking it off the table, and that you have to make this decision. And my dad and I like mulled it over for a couple holes, and my dad said, you know what, Joe? He said, they called you last minute. They want you to take this deal. He says, you know what? He said, tell your agent. He said, call him back and tell them to go after themselves. That's what my dad said.
Wow.
And I never heard my dad swear like that often. And so it resonated with me, like he was mad. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to do this. And then I
Yeah,
needed my dad's encouragement because it was like a lot for me to turn down an energy contract.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so we did. And it was the best decision we ever made because Randy got the job in Anaheim with the Mighty Ducks like 2 weeks later or a week later. And then my phone rang like 2 or 3 days after that. And it was like, Randy loves you. He trusts you. We want you to come to Anaheim, and you might actually have a chance to make the team. So that was like my fate was decided, and that that moment. And it was decided because Randy had clarified who I was as a player and simplified who I was and what type of player I was and what I could be best at. And then of course the rest is history. I ended up making the Ducks, and
Yeah.
part of that's his first season. My rookie season was 04, 05, 06. And that's where my NHL dream was achieved.
Dan, that's a great story. So you took Randy's advice to heart and laid out like not his plan, but also his advice to help you get to the NHL, and it worked pretty much. That is unbelievable. And so that was a great season too. Like I say we, but the team lost to Edmonton that year, and that was an outstanding team. I think Dwayne Rollison was on fire that series, and if you remember that. But I'll just say about Randy, like he was one of those guys who's old school, and he was one of those guys that, like, for me, if he wasn't like having fun or giving you shit in a way, if he wasn't giving you shit, like it, that's what I told myself. Like he must really like me if he's giving me shit, right? And so
Exactly.
like no, like if you think about our old video coordinator, like he rode him daily, and he would take a bullet for Joe Trotta. You know what I mean? Like that's how Randy is. And but for you, like he never rode you. I never seen him like ride you, but he absolutely loved you because he loved your niche on the team. And it wasn't it wasn't flashy, right? It was you had Scotty that year first, and then Boscheman came in and started getting hot. Like you had those guys, but you were always there as like maybe you were the third pair, and what you were getting out of Joe Dipenta on a nightly basis. And I think that is just phenomenal.
Yeah, thanks. And Randy helped create that, because that was not the player I was a season and a half before that. I was lost, didn't know how I was going to get the NHL. So I was trying to do all the things that I thought I ought to do, which is to be offensive, which was out of my character, out of my gifting. So he clarified all that for me. And then, confidence is everything. When you have clarity as to what you're trying to accomplish, and that clarity gives confidence, and then confidence leads to stronger performance. And it was it was an amazing run.
And I'll say this, like I remember vividly, I remember when you were there, all the guys would be back in town skating, and we, you know, I always look at it like guys were like guys had anxiety about performing well on the off ice testing, and so they would they would all take a day off from the ice the day before camp officially started, so that would be running the testing. But you always skated. I remember this vividly because you perfected your craft, and what is your craft? It's blocking shots, it's chipping the puck off the glass. I remember vividly you were on the ice by yourself. All the other guys are in the weight room stretching or whatever, and Timo comes in. And this is like no knock on you or Timo or anything, but Timo's like, yeah, Joe's out there practicing chipping the puck off the glass. He's like, when I practice, I shoot to score goals. This guy's chipping it off the glass. But I'm like thinking, like, you know what though? That's what Joe does, and he's perfecting it. And I thought that was pretty neat. And I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember skating by yourself, like when everyone else was taking the day off, or no?
I'm sure I did.
But you definitely remember practicing chipping it off the glass, I
Oh
imagine.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Hey, so talk about the wooden stick. I have one still here, somewhere. I think you're the last player I seen use a wooden stick. I think Adam Oates was the one prior to that. What's for those who may not know, like why the wooden stick?
So I used a wooden stick up until my very last season as professional. I was like, maybe with a couple months to go in the year, I switched to a composite stick, but I never really liked it. It was just like, yeah, all right, I'll give it a shot. But the wooden stick for me was just, and Randy was part of this. Like he just said, you need something that your game's not flashy. You don't need to shoot the puck 10 miles an hour harder. So you just have something that when you get a feel for it, and for me, a wooden stick just had a better feel. When I get the puck on my stick, it just felt like there was some give to it. It was comfortable. I'd used it for 25 years of my life, the wooden stick. I guess it was just a natural thing. And when I ever switched to the composite, the one piece is what we used to call it.
Yeah.
The puck would bounce off of it, and it just didn't have that same feel. And yeah, I loved how hard my shot was, and it just didn't have the same feel. And I was always tweaking my sticks and making them, shaving them, doing all kinds of crazy stuff in my sticks. So the wooden stick was allowed me to do that. But yeah, that was really the rationale. And like it didn't fit my game to have this harder shot and all that. Like if I get an extra assist or goal in the year, at the expense of turning the puck over an extra 30 times, it wasn't really, the risk reward wasn't really there for me. But I enjoyed it. There was one player in the American Hockey League that played another season after I retired and used a wood stick. Mark
Oh,
Watton. He was a
okay.
veteran player in the American Hockey League, and he was the last player that I know of to use a wood stick. So I see it as I was the second last player to use a hockey stick. So
That's great. I always wanted to ask you that. All right, so talk about the 06-07 season. I mean, we got the big unit prongs, and we also had Scotty, we had Boscheman, we had Sean O'Donnell, we had you, Ken Huskins, and then we brought in Rick Jackman. So talk about that. Like talk about, knowing your role on that decor. It's tough to find something that's you're better at those guys at, for example. Like talk about being on that decor and what that was like and how good of a decor that was in team.
yeah, we all knew our role. Like if I go through it, like Scotty and Bosch played together. They're our offensive pair, and then we had Prongs and Odie, and Odie was like the perfect match for Prongs. They played so well together, and they ended up playing together again in Philadelphia
Yeah.
uh, in a few seasons later after Prongs was traded there. So there's all there's just a good chemistry, and then like Husky and I played together in Manitoba. So
Hmm.
Husky Husky got called up about halfway through the season after we traded Shane O'Brien, and Husky was like, we played together in Manitoba with Randy. So Randy loved Husky, always gave him shit all the time, right? Like we'd always joke with him. I remember
He looks
one
like he
day,
was sleeping all the time, but he was,
yeah,
he was wide awake. He's
yeah.
really, really impressive human guy that he is.
He said Husky said he goes up to Husky at the start of practice one day and he goes, Husky, he goes, guess who was asking about you the other day? And Husky goes, who? He goes, nobody.
That's a
Just
typical
always gave
Randy
it to him.
chirp. Yeah.
Um, but like you said, that's how you knew like Randy loved you. Is, he's
Yeah.
just fun so yeah, Husky is such a good teammate. And then we
Yeah.
played together in Manitoba, and Husky had a great training camp the same season I made the Ducks. And I remember watching him play and thinking like Husky's like really he and I were neck and neck, and for whatever reason like they kept me on the team,
Yeah.
but Husky went down and had a great year in the American Hockey League again, despite not making the team. And then the next year again, he always had the best attitude, came back and he just stuck with it. And
Yep.
and he got
Sure
called
did.
up and he was like if I was a sixth defenseman, Husky was a fifth. Like he
Yep.
surpassed me that year in terms of performance. And then he was a big part of our run in the playoffs and ended up getting played a number of years in the NHL after I was left and my run was over in the NHL and to the American League in Europe. He played a number of years after and just kind of had this longevity of he was consistent, and so we all had this like key role in the team that we brought to the table and we bought into it, and it was an impressive defensive core. Like I mean, I wasn't like a star guy in the NHL by any means and wouldn't have made a lot of the teams, but I knew what my role was just play 12 minutes a night and just be tough to play against, and that was good enough to solidify that back in, and having a player that was maybe more offensive playing in that role as a sixth defenseman, I don't think would have fit. They really
Hmm.
needed they needed me on that team, and I was an integral part of that team and the role I played. So it was fun to know my role, be part of it. And I remember prongs at the end of the season. We were going into game three, going into game four in Ottawa, and I had been a healthy scratch in the playoffs from game four against the Detroit Red Wings. After Rick got called in and scored the game-winning goal, I
Yep.
was the odd man out in game five in Detroit, and then we won in dramatic fashion. The team got the turnover and scored in overtime, and then we went back home, and I was still healthy scratch because they kept the same lineup going, and that continued on in the Stanley Cup Finals. And I actually didn't know if I was going to get in. You know, I was happy the team was winning, but selfishly, I was like, hey, you know, I want to get back in the lineup. And Prongs got suspended, and I got inserted into the lineup, and I remember like being so nervous for that game, and the media in Canada was like all over me, being like, "How are you going to replace Chris Pronger?" And you know, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And like, first off, not going to replace Chris Pronger. I'm just going to play my game. And I was so nervous. Like I've never been so nervous for a game. Maybe the game five when we had a chance to win, I was just nervous, but I don't think I was. Like I actually was like thinking to myself, I don't know how I'm going to play this game. Like I had the moment of like, I don't know, think I can do this. Like playing in the Stanley Cup Finals in Canada, all that pressure going in, and I was kind of getting ready for it and thinking like, I'm just going to get out there and put one foot in front of the other, and I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I ended up having the game of my life. Like I
Hmm.
just it's so well, and but I didn't even like it was. I was so distraught before the game started, and I got in the game and had the game of my life. And Chris was in the stands feeling guilty. And I'm sure he must have watched me play and think, thank goodness Joe played this well. And
Hmm.
I know he did because he told me afterwards. It meant the world to him that I played that well. He still talks about it when he sees that game. He says Joe had such a good game. And and I think that was part of it. That was part of it. I looked up to Prongs, Hall of Famer. Like I knew how good he was. He was a guy that I looked up to. And I think that was part of it, was that I knew that I was that I had to perform to help him out. And that made my game go to like another level, maybe just in the back of my mind. And I was so proud of that. And he came up to me afterwards. After we won, we were celebrating at the bar. I remember being down in Sharky's in Newport. He put my arm, I was getting ready to go home, and he just put his arm around me and he just said, I want to thank you for that game. Like what you did, stepping up like that. And it just meant the world to me, like that somebody like Chris, who
Yeah.
had, you know, had everything I wanted in stardom and being the best player on the team, one of the best players on the team, that he looked to me and said, you know what, you stepped up and that meant everything for me. That was like huge. And that was what our team was about. Like we just had
Yeah.
our roles, we had each other's backs, and that was why we were such a great. That's why when you look at the Ottawa Senators versus the Anaheim Ducks on paper, very similar teams, both second seeds in our conference, both were had to beat great teams, the first overall seed, and both of our conferences. And we beat Detroit, they beat Buffalo, and on paper, I think they had 48 wins, we had 50, so very evenly matched. That was a difference. We
Yeah.
just expected to win. If we didn't win, it was gonna. Remember Brian Burke saying to us, I don't know if you were in the room, Sean, when at the start of the year, he said, if we don't win the Stanley Cup this year, it's a failed season. And we just had a mantra, like team of destiny. If we don't win, it's a failed season. So we just had that mindset going in that finals. Like the worst thing could happen is like we look back with regret because this is the team that has the potential. And so we just expected to win everything. And it wasn't happy to be here. Like perhaps Ottawa had some of that. We just had the mindset from day one that this is the team of destiny. We have to win this. So that was what it was like to be part of that team.
Yeah, that's a great point. You did hit it there. Like it was that expectation was from the get-go, wasn't it? Like when you had it probably happened when Pronger came over. It was okay, we, lost to Edmonton. He had a big part of that, huge part of that, and then we get him in his prime. And then yeah, that was there was that level of expectation on a daily basis. And it's just rolled. Like I think the start of the year we had points in 15 straight games. It's a great team. You had several characters and roles, like you said. You had You had you guys like Marchant and Robbie Niedermeyer. You had Getzy, Perry, all those guys, Penner, Kunitz. List goes on, and that was a good team. I still think, you know, it's hard not to think like that's one of the best. I hate to say recent, it's been so long ago now. It's one of the best Stanley Cup champions. Like when you're talking about like top to bottom of the lineup, they they could be they could win a game where it was tough and physical, no question. You could win a game that was fast up and down the ice. We can do that with Tamo, with Andy McDonald. Like it was, you had the team had everything, to be honest. And goaltending, you can't. The goaltending was unbelievable with Jiggy and Briz. So it's and there's definitely because of that expectation, the guys flourished and they got it done, which was fun to see. So let me ask you this: so were you after that? Were you with the Ducks in 07, 08?
Yeah, I
You
played one
were.
more year
That's
after
right.
that, and I only got into 23 games, so I was a healthy scratch for most of the season, which was another tough thing to go through when you're a healthy scratch and have to watch most of the games.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, like for me, you're always I hate to say a great healthy scratch. There's so many guys that can be a bad healthy scratch and get pissed off and, get bitter. But again, that's a testament to your attitude and look at things. Like you were never really one of those guys that was going into Randy's office and bitching about it. So that's a tough situation, and no one wants to be scratched, but you handled it with ultimate professionalism, always.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And I remember having a proud moment when Rob Niedermeyer came up to me towards the end of the season. Like the season was maybe a month left and it was kind of almost over. And he said to me, he said, Joe, I have never played with another. You're the best I've seen somebody handle being the healthy scratch of anyone I played with. And I'm
Hmm.
like this was out of the blue. We were in Chicago on the road eating dinner. And I was like, I wasn't expecting it, and it just came out of the blue. And I said, "Well, I still remember that compliment, saying thank you." And I wasn't like intending to. That wasn't like my goal was to have somebody come up to me and recognize me for like it was hard. I hated it.
Yeah.
I had to get ready like I was playing every game, but then I'd find out in pregame skate that I wasn't going, and then I have to do a bag skate, and then I'd have to you know, spend the rest of the day waiting around while the guys are going, getting ready. I'm having to just stay out of their way and then be around the rink and watch the game from the stands. And like, it's hard emotionally. And you
Yeah.
do that 58 times you're a healthy scratch that season, 58. And that's
Yeah.
58 times I had to prepare like I was playing on, I wasn't playing. Like
Yeah.
it was hard. So yeah, like to get that compliment at the end of the year, if somebody actually sees it and sees value in it. And that's all I was trying to do is bring value to the team when I got in the lineup and then if I was able to scratch. But you know what? Like I ended up playing the last game of the season against the Kings. And I got in the lineup, something happened. I was in the lineup, played the last game. That was my last NHL game. And in that game, I got a goal. So I was like, I scored
Wow.
my last NHL game, I got a goal. My second game in the NHL, I got a goal. So I didn't do a lot in between, but I didn't score a lot in between, but I was proud. You know what? I got a goal my very last game in the NHL career. And I was actually part of a record with Teemu Solani. Teemu got a goal 8 seconds afterwards. Go figure, 8 seconds, number eight. He got a goal 8 seconds after my goal, like just went down the ice and scored. And it was the fastest two goals in Ducks history. So I had a record there. I don't know if it's still a record or
That's
not, but
awesome.
yeah, it's kind of fun.
Well, that's outstanding. So let's talk about post NHL career. Like I remember you were involved in some charity work with cancer, if I recall, right? Talk about that and what were you doing in the community? It's something to do with roller hockey, right?
Yeah, that's right. Good memory. So I had when I played for the Halifax Mooseheads, we used to go on a weekly basis to go visit kids in the hospital. And it was just something it was part of the team for a long time before I got there. And I just tagged along and was going to the hospital fairly regularly, like probably not every week, but every other week. And I met a girl there that had leukemia, and her name was Jessica, which happens to be my wife's name, but it's not.
Hmm.
I didn't marry her, but her name is Jessica, and she had leukemia. I didn't really know a lot about leukemia. I just thought she probably was going to die. Like that was pretty much what I knew about leukemia. And so she used to come to the games, and after the game, wait for me, and I'd sign autographs. I was like 20, 21, and she was probably like 11 years old, probably the same age as my daughter today. And so she became like my biggest fan. And after the season was over, we didn't have social media and all that, so I didn't keep in touch with her. I had no idea what happened, and honestly, I just assumed that she didn't make it. That was pretty much my understanding of cancer. And so the fast forward 7 years after we won the Stanley Cup with the Ducks, I had my 24 hours with the cup in Cold Harbor, and we were doing a public signing that day, and I did a TV interview, and I remember just kind of standing off to the side with my wife, and I was just kind of taking it all in. And a couple of girls came up to me, and they were like 18, 19 years old, approximately. And I was like, just, not really expecting much. And they just come up, I thought they'd ask for an autograph or something. And so one girl said to me, she said, "Do you remember me?" And I don't know if anyone's ever asked you, Sean, if you remember them and you have no idea who they are. Like, you've got like 1 or 2 seconds to figure it out, right? 'Cause otherwise, it's obvious you have no idea who they are, because like you either have to say their name or you have to be able to say. So it's a very awkward question to have to answer. And I don't know what came over me, but Jessica. I said, "Jessica," and she goes,
Really?
"Oh," she says, "I'm all better now." And I just remember like giving her a big hug, and like and it was such a cool moment in that day. It was so many
Yeah.
cool moments, and I remembered it. So that spurred like this series of events where like the next couple of months I got invited by a fan of the Ducks who was a friend of ours, Rick, and his wife Diana, to do a fundraising event for kids with cancer. And I remember being like, you know what, I'm busy. I don't really have time for this. Like I'm getting training for the off season, getting ready. And I remember thinking like, you know what, I just had that meaningful moment with this young woman that's now better, cured of leukemia. And I said, you know what, if I don't step up and do this, nobody else is going to do it. So I just said, all right, I'll do it. And it was a slog. Like we did that event, my wife and I and Rick and Diana, we planned this, we did all the work. The Ducks were there to help and support, but like all the logistics, everything was on our shoulders. And it was an off-season project that we put together. And we raised some good money at the roller hockey rink, and I honestly like we finished the event, and I was like, all right, I'm never doing that again. That's what I would say. And then the next year, it was like, we're doing it again. And I was like, okay, event's over. I'm never doing that again. And then I left Anaheim, and I was off playing with some different teams, and so we didn't do it again. But after I was done playing hockey, I remember going back in my hometown, talking to a recruiter. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was totally lost. Like another chapter, another episode, we can talk about what it's like to retire from the NHL. But it was a really tough time. And I remember being in a recruiter's office and she was asking me, what do you want to do? And I was giving her the Randy Carlisle response, because I was jack of all trades. Well, I could do this, I could do that. Where I said, well, what type of player you are? She was asking me like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, age old question, no idea, but I'll just tell you, like, I want to do something in sales, or, whatever it is that I thought that I could do. And she said to me, she says, I don't have anything in that area, but what I do have is something that just came onto my desk like 3 weeks ago. And they need an executive director for this chapter of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society here in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And let me tell you about it. And she started to tell me about it. And when she first said, like, this is why I got this job opportunity in nonprofit, I like was thinking, no way, I'm never doing this. Like, this is not what I'm looking for. That was my initial response. But when she shared the first minute, she was like, it's entrepreneurial, and you got to put a stamp, and make this your own, and you've got a team, and we're going to pay you $85,000 a year. I was like, wow, like really, you can get paid to do this? Like, are you kidding me? And then I ended up getting the job, and I was like, because I knew after a minute her describing it, like, that's what I want to do. So I ended up moving from California back to Halifax and doing this job for like 6 years, and I did it. I got promoted. I was really successful in doing it. I was passionate about it, and we raised like almost 90 million bucks. Like by the time I
Wow.
was done. Yeah,
Wow.
as an organization, raised almost $90 million over those 6 years. So it was like
Wow.
it was an amazing time, and I learned a ton, and that's where I got exposed to so many different leadership opportunities. Was a vice president in charge of the entire country operationally, raising money, and had 6 directors that reported to me. So it was a fun time. I learned a lot, and they treated me so well, and made this big impact on with cancer research and services. So that was that chapter of my career
Yeah,
was years there. So
that's awesome. That's great that that turned into that for you. Now you also did some work with Bruno, correct? Where-
yeah, Bruno and I did an event. We raised some money. That was a lasagna dinner. I forgot about that. Yeah, that was also that was to raise money for his charity, which is to feed kids that come from families that they can't afford to have 3 square meals a day. And Bruno at the White House, he still raises money called with
Yeah.
Katarina's Club. He's raising a lot of money these days. It's come a long way, and I was just a small part of that. I did a lasagna dinner and raised a couple, I don't know, 5 grand or something like that for his charity.
Yeah,
And that was cool.
he's a remarkable human, what he does every day, feeding the homeless and the kids in those hotels in Anaheim there.
Yeah,
And that restaurant is unbelievable too. I know that it burned down a few years ago. I think they rebuilt it and they're probably
right.
back in operations, right?
Yeah, no, it's they rebuilt it, and it's quite remarkable, and they continue to, I don't know how many thousands of kids a day. They partnered with all these different organizations that are all now doing it. So they've got these satellite operations. So he's making a huge impact, helping a lot of kids and families.
That's awesome. No. So what are you doing nowadays, Joe?
So when I was at that Leukemia Lymphoma Society, when I got promoted, we were having some culture issues, and we just lacked leadership, the leadership team. We implemented a system called EOS in that organization, which stands for the Entrepreneur Operating System, and it helps leaders. It's a complete system on how to operate the organization. And so we adopted it, and it helped us achieve 3 things. It helped us to get on the same page with our vision about where we're going as an organization and our plan to get there. It helped create a traction within our organization so that all of the leaders were seeing the same shared vision, and they were all much more disciplined and accountable to executing on it. So wherever we looked, we saw people executing on our vision. And then lastly was we created a healthy environment where all of our leaders functioned well and operated as a team, because in most organizations, leaders don't operate as a team. And then we got everybody, all 70 staff, seeing the same shared vision, understanding the plan, want to be part of it. All of our team members were more disciplined and accountable, and we created a work environment where everyone spent time together. And I just saw the fruits of that in that organization. And I saw when we hired our implementer, our coach to help us implement this, I thought I could do that. And that's when I said, hey, I'm going to go do that. And I ended up taking a leap of faith and became an implementer myself 3.5 years ago. And so now I've been working with, gosh, I've done over 100 full days, well into the hundreds of full day sessions, over 30 organizations I've worked with to implement EOS to help them get vision traction healthy in the organization. And I work with 10 to 250 employees is kind of the sweet spot, about 2 million in revenue or more. And 2
Wow.
million to 100 million in revenue is kind of our sweet spot. And it's been awesome. I'm actively working with 18 companies right now, some here in California, some back in Canada. And it's just a ton of fun just to help them get that vision traction healthy throughout their leadership team. And then as goes the leadership team throughout the rest of their organization. So we create high performing teams at every level of the organization. So when we get that leadership team to a 9 or a 10 out of 10, then it allows the other teams in the organization to rise to that level too. And that's what I love, because I played on the best teams in the world. Our Anaheim Ducks team is considered definitely in the top 20 of all time. And I put us right up there with the Montreal Canadiens in the 76
Yeah.
with, and so I know what it's like to play in the top team. So that's my passion. I get to create high performing teams using EOS, using those tools. So that's what I love to do. So I've got the best job in the world right now. I love what I'm doing, and yeah, I wouldn't trade it for. I'm glad that I only got 3 years in the NHL, because it gave me that hunger to go to find what else I was made for, and this is definitely it. So
I
I'm
love
enjoying
that.
this season of my life.
Well, you mentioned two words in that when I think about you, you said discipline and accountability. and you definitely had that as a player, and I'm sure it's easy for you to apply that to what you're doing now. And I remember Randy always used to say, hard work's a given. Like you have to hard work. Like everyone works hard. And when you have discipline and accountability and apply that, it's the results are outstanding. And I'm just glad to hear you doing something that you enjoy doing and you're passionate about, and it's who you were as a player too. So that's awesome to hear.
Thanks, Sean. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, Joe, thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome catching up to you. I love these things because I get to catch up with people that came across my life, and you were definitely someone that made an impact on me. Just like I said, accountability, discipline. I mean, you were shredded when you played, and you knew what your role was, and you performed to your best ability at that. So, yeah, just congrats on your success, and you're always going to be a Stanley Cup champion. I think that's awesome.
Thanks, Sean.
All
I
right,
appreciate
Joe. Hey, thanks for coming on, bud. And hey, how can listeners get in touch with you? Sorry, real quick. If they
They can
had
get in touch, they can go direct through my website. If you Google my name and EOS, it'll take you to the EOS website. I have a microsite on there, and they can contact me directly through that if they wanna get in touch with me for
Awesome.
whatever makes sense. Happy to be an encouragement for young athletes or, yeah, it's something I do. I speak just pro bono to, to teams and give them some inspiration. So yeah, happy to help and
Awesome.
provide some inspiration and encouragement through some of the learnings I've had, things I failed at, or things I've learned over the course of my hockey journey.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Joe. I appreciate you coming on, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Joe. Take care,
Okay,
buddy. Bye.
take care. Bye.